In today's video, I'm going to give you a couple of examples on how to do well in behavioral interviews.
Dan, tell me about the time when you did not effectively manage your projects and something did not get completed on time. What was the impact? And what approaches do you use to ensure the right type of deliverables when dealing with multiple competing priorities? Yes, I believe we all have failures, and I'm certainly no exceptions to this. But the important thing from any failure is to eventually try to overcome this failure by maybe learning a few things about it, and then immediately getting back on track. Um, Another important thing with failures, I found that sport to be quite useful to get through difficult moments in both my professional and through my personal experiences.
As you might have already noticed here, this answer is superficial and vague, so the interviewer will not be able to screen you based on your strength here. The definition of a behavioral interview is one where the interviewer is asking for specific past experiences so they can eventually predict your future performance on the job. Also, behavioral questions are best answered using the STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. Last but not least, you must also dive deeper and try to understand as to why they ask you a specific question. For example, they might ask you for a failure story because they want to see what you learned from that experience. A hypothetical answer or a hypothetical sentence could at best be an introductory statement, maybe to win a few more seconds, for a more specific answer from your professional experience. Next, and this example will be particularly useful for roles such as sales. You don't have to give it all from the beginning. You might also have an answer which invites follow-up questions.
Dan, tell me about the time when you realized that you needed a deeper level of expertise to get your job done. What was the challenge and what was the outcome? Sure. So, in a previous venture I started, we developed orthodontic appliances for complex dental treatments. And soon after we launched some of these products, we realized they're actually harder to get done right than I had originally anticipated. So I decided that my expertise would be essential to the success of this project. So I took 1 year off to learn all there is about orthodontics. And this actually proved to be the right thing. And I eventually made a successful exit.
So notice how this answer is good, structured in the STAR format. However, it's a bit short and lacks detail. Let's look at a couple of follow-up questions here.
Right. And was there a key metric that you used to measure success for your business? Sure. So an important indicator of success for our appliances was the number of times they came back to us for small adjustments or even defects. And we managed to improve this by 5 percentage points in the first year, and then by 1 percentage point in the following 2 years. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when did this happen? Was this a recent example? Yes, I exited the business last year.
So the point I wanted to make here is that any subsequent exchange from your original concise STAR answer would basically further sell yourself as a candidate on your strength. This is when compared to giving an original 10-minute answer of you essentially bragging about how you successfully exited the business. Now, this interviewing technique works best for people for whom communication is a strength. The main risk of giving short, concise answers is you might be perceived as someone superficially prepared for the interview. So if you want to avoid this, maybe try to give long, convincing first answers in the beginning of the interview and then subtly move on to more concise ones, inviting for conversation. Next point, and this will be quick. Too many of you make the mistake to assume your interviewer is your best friend or the job interview just another informal experience. Just put yourself in an interviewer's shoes for a moment. There's no such thing as the ideal candidate, as there's no such thing as the perfect job. Now, I'm not saying that you should look at your interviewer as your enemy, but rather to keep a cautiously optimistic approach. Your interviewer might follow up because they want to help you to eventually course correct, or they might follow up because they want to do a backbone test. Let's look at another example here.
So Dan, tell me about the time when you disagreed with your boss. Yes, 6 months ago, I was working as a PM in charge of a 6-people team, and my boss has challenged me to stop all pending features for a new request. And it was not my preference, but it turns out my boss's call was right, and the feature was relatively profitable. All right, but in retrospect, do you believe it's a really, really good idea? Because, I mean, what about the people on your team? Or what about all that code being lost due to eventually having to switch these operations all this fast? Yes, you're right. It was indeed dangerous, and maybe I could have also negotiated with my boss a bit of extra time to do some code preparation and to eventually save as much code as possible. As for our team's morale, yes, indeed, I could have done more about this. And in fact, communication with my team is something that I'm working to improve on.
So just briefly here, most serious interviews will contain some challenge. This is primarily because one of the most efficient methods to get to know someone within a limited amount of time is to put stress on them. This is why the best candidates recognize these moments like 95% of the time, and together with the good interview preparation are able to not only answer such questions well, but also make a good impression and bias the interviewer towards them. And speaking of questions here, any interviewer or company have their specific set of questions which they ask over and over again. Elevator pitch: why do you want to work for this company? Tell me about the time when you had to deal with ambiguous circumstance. Tell me about the time when you didn't get along with someone, or tell me about the time when you failed. Prepare these questions and you'll do significantly better in any job interview. It's really as simple as that. Next, I'm going to provide you with 2 sample questions, and I'll ask you why these questions get asked in a job interview. What is the behavior that they're most interested in? First question: a time when a deadline was in danger. So why would someone ask you such a question in a job interview? It's because they want to assess your ability to deliver results. All right, so they want you to talk about the time when you went through a challenging situation but ultimately smashed it and delivered successfully. Or if you want to get more fancy here, you could also talk about the time when you failed if you can sell yourself on your learnings from that same story. Next question: tell me about the time when a colleague did not like you. So why would someone ask you such a question in a job interview? Because they want to screen your interpersonal skills, how you work with others. And you'll be surprised how many times candidates take the opportunity to revenge on some of their ex-colleagues or their boss, or to speak negatively about their previous employers here. This is why it's important to prepare to carefully pick your words and communicate the idea you want to transmit more efficiently. As I said, the best candidates are able to predict like 95% of the time why a question gets asked, and they will actually give the interviewer what they want to hear, and this is how you essentially bias them towards you for the purpose of a job interview. Last but not least, during a job interview, you will also be asked if you have any questions for them. a good idea for you would be to prepare a list with possible questions for each of your interviewers, knowing that this is only half of the effort. The other half would be during the job interview, to pick the questions that you find the most relevant based on how the conversation with your interviewer evolves. So hopefully you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.